Liam went unnoticed. Tall, skinny, hunched posture. Glasses always slipping down his nose. The kind of guy who walks into a room and no one even sees him. Working as a freelance cleaner for events, his world was made of silences between boxes, trash bags, and brooms, and he liked it that way. He lived in a small studio apartment in an old neighborhood near Roosevelt Station, where the streetlights were older than the buildings, and the bars opened far too early. Jade, on the other hand, was a different kind of presence, a nighttime event security guard, standing 5 feet 7 inches of pure firmness. Broad shoulders, grounded walk, thighs defined by years of jiu-jitsu training. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her body spoke for her. Just a look from her was enough to make anyone think twice before causing trouble. She didn't smile easily, but when she did, there was something wild and steady in it at the same time. She lived in a more distant part of the city and took the subway every day to work. They hadn't seen each other before, but that night, at a big party held inside a converted industrial warehouse where music, smoke, and sweat filled the air, something happened. A fight broke out near the bar, pushing, shouting, and in the middle of the chaos, Liam, who only wanted to grab a glass of water and leave, was mistaken for one of the guys involved. She acted on instinct, arm around his neck, firm hold, body against body, him trying to speak, but no sound. For a few seconds, everything went dark. When he came to, he was outside the party, lying on the damp asphalt with the streetlights flickering above. Jade, from the top of the entry stairs, just watched him. No apology, no smile, but with one eyebrow slightly raised, as if she, too, was somehow surprised inside. They didn't know it yet, but something had started. 2 days later, Liam got a notification on his phone. Cleaning job. Post-party event. Location? Roosevelt Warehouse. He sighed. The same place he'd been thrown out of like some troublemaker. By mistake, by her. But work was work, and he was the kind of guy who swallowed his pride before swallowing the late rent. He showed up early, as always. The warehouse was quiet, smelling of dried beer and crushed flowers. Morning light poured through the tall, dusty windows, revealing the aftermath of the night before. That's when the side door creaked open, and she walked in. Jade. No uniform this time. Tight black hoodie, hair tied up in a messy bun, gloves on her hands. She wasn't expecting to see him there, but she didn't show surprise either. She just stared at him for a few seconds, unblinking. Liam, on the other hand, froze. He started, but couldn't finish. She calmly pulled off one glove. You weren't part of that fight, were you? He shook his head. Number? I just wanted some water. She nodded slightly, then turned, grabbed a push broom, and started clearing the shards on the floor. It was the first time he'd seen her outside the chaos of an event. No noise, no crowd, no flashing lights. And still, she owned the space. Her arm muscles showed even under the hoodie. The way she moved, steady, efficient, almost feline. He couldn't explain it, but something in him stirred, somewhere between fear and curiosity. At one point, while moving a toppled bench, she turned to the side and looked at him over her shoulder. Relax. I'm not going to choke you again. And smiled. For the first time. He didn't know whether to smile back or hold his breath. But he knew, right then, he would never forget that look. The following week, Liam got another call. Same place, same contractor. This time, he didn't hesitate. He arrived with a backpack on his shoulders, gloves in his pocket, and a question in his chest. Would she be there? She was, sitting on a crate, sipping coffee from a red thermal mug, alone, as if the abandoned warehouse were her command center. She noticed him, just nodded with her chin, like acknowledging an ally. This time, there was no tension, just a comfortable silence and something more, something that didn't have a name yet. While they cleaned in opposite corners, a heavy box fell from a shelf. Liam went over, crouched down, tried to lift it. 3 seconds later, she was by his side. No words, just steady hands helping him lift the weight, like it was nothing. When he looked, he saw her muscles tighten under the black shirt, her jaw clenched with effort. She caught his glance, didn't get offended, didn't look away, just said, bluntly, "Even heavy for me. You wouldn't have managed," and walked off. He didn't reply, but a smile slipped out involuntarily. At the end of the shift, she approached him with an almost casual tone. "Another event here Saturday. You coming back?" Liam hesitated. "Not sure I'm welcome." She shrugged. "I asked for you. The owner prefers people who know the space, and you work well." Coming from her, that sounded like an intimate compliment. On Saturday, she wore the same outfit, same red mug, and an extra water bottle on the table. "Brought one for you." No unnecessary smiles. No games. Just a gesture. Director. Practical. And somehow, strangely caring. That's how it started. No promises. No explanations. Just two people sharing the same space, with less and less distance between them. Liam began to notice something shifting inside him. It wasn't passion. It wasn't excitement. It was something else. Something subtler. Rarer. Comfort. But a strange kind of comfort. Jade wasn't the type to smile often, nor to ask how his day was. But when he arrived, the supplies he needed were already set aside. When he forgot something, she'd hand it to him, before he even realized it was missing. And when a group of workers mocked him for being too scrawny to lift boxes, it was her voice that cut through the laughter with a single line. "He's not here to compete. He's here to do it better than you." And he does. Liam didn't know how to react, but something inside settled. He who always felt out of place in spaces filled with loud voices and flexed muscles, now walked beside someone who had all of that, and yet made him feel safe. When they had to move things together, she gave short commands. "You hold here." I lift, and he followed without hesitation. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. She wasn't asking for submission. He was offering it. Not out of weakness, but out of trust. It felt like walking beside a solid wall during a storm. It wasn't fear. It was relief. And he didn't know it yet. But he had already crossed an inner line you don't come back from. The night seemed like any other. Another event. Another cleanup. Another quiet moment with her nearby. Firm. Focused. In control. But all it took was one moment to change everything. Liam had wandered into a restricted area by mistake. He was looking for the makeshift restroom in the warehouse, but took the wrong hallway. A security guard, a new one who didn't recognize him, stepped in his way. "Hey, where do you think you're going? This isn't for janitors." The voice was sharp, the hand on Liam's chest even sharper. He tried to explain, awkwardly, but his quiet demeanor only fueled the other man's contempt. And before he could say much else, he heard, "You should be mopping floors, not walking where you don't belong." That's when Jade appeared. She didn't shout. She didn't rush. She simply walked over, slow and steady, like someone who already knew how this would end. "Take your hand off him," she said. The rookie laughed, thinking it was a joke. until Jade took a step closer, eyes locked, stance unwavering. It was as if she filled the air around her. And suddenly, he looked smaller. Now, the word hit like concrete, and the man backed off. Liam stood frozen, unsure what to do. He felt embarrassed, confused, like he should say something, stand up for himself, prove a point. But Jade turned to him and, without anger, simply said, "You're exactly where I want you to be, and no one touches what's with me. Got it?" He nodded, barely able to speak, barely able to breathe. Later that night, alone in the supply room, washing chemical-stained hands, Liam looked at his reflection in the cracked mirror and whispered to himself, "With me." And that strange comfort returned, now stronger, and just a little dangerous. It was a rainy Saturday. The event had been canceled at the last minute, but Liam was already on his way. Jade, alone at the entrance, saw him arriving, soaked, hood crooked, backpack shielding his tools. She didn't even tell him it wasn't necessary. She just opened the door and let him in. "You're gonna get sick like that." He gave a shy smile, shaking his head like saying, "I'm fine. Want some coffee?" "I do." The empty warehouse felt like a completely different place. No music, no voices, no security, just the sound of rain tapping against the tall windows. And the two of them in that quiet comfort that only exists when no one's trying to prove anything. She made the coffee while he took off his hoodie. His thin t-shirt clung to his body, exposing more than just skin. It revealed his vulnerability. She watched silently, and then, without warning, walked over to him, not fast, not slow, at her own pace. "You look at me differently." He widened his eyes, confused. Before he could deny it, she continued, "Since that night, since the chokehold, since you realized you don't have to run." Liam said nothing, but he didn't step back either. Then she got close enough to touch, one steady hand on the back of his neck, the other sliding down his arm to his fingers. She guided his hand to her waist. "Feel that?" He nodded. "I'm not asking anything from you. Just let it happen." And then she kissed him. It wasn't a kiss of impulse. It was a kiss with intention. Firm, directed, like she already knew what would come next. Liam closed his eyes, and for the first time, he didn't think about how to react. He didn't want to lead. He didn't want to analyze. He just wanted to feel. When the kiss ended, she rested her forehead against his and said, "You don't have to pretend to be strong with me." He answered in a near whisper, "I think this is the first time that actually makes me feel safe." And in that moment, the line was crossed, not out of weakness, but out of desire. The desire to trust, the desire to be led by someone who knew exactly what to do with that trust. She led him to the back of the warehouse, where the unlit floodlights left everything in a dusky haze. It was an old dressing room with a worn-out couch, a cracked mirror, and the smell of damp wood. Jade closed the door without locking it. She didn't need to. The silence belonged entirely to them. Liam sat on the couch, still unsure whether this was just a break or the beginning of something more. She took off her jacket, revealing toned arms, a grounded posture, and that direct, unwavering gaze. "Are you scared?" she asked, without a trace of irony. He thought for a moment and answered, honestly, "No, I'm curious." She gave a slight smile, like she already knew that would be his answer. She approached slowly, climbing onto him with the kind of precision that comes from knowing your own weight, your own body, your own intent. There was no hesitation in her movements. And when he instinctively tried to place his hands on her waist, she caught both his wrists with one hand and lifted them above his head. Not harshly, with control. Like this, he obeyed, felt the tension in his fingers and the release that came with it. With her free hand, she touched his face, traced down to his collarbone, then his chest. Like someone exploring, but also teaching. She didn't speak much, but her eyes said everything. You're mine now. And he was. Straddling him, Jade moved with deliberate calm. She made long pauses, watched his reactions, tested the space between them. Sometimes she whispered things he couldn't fully hear, but felt on his skin. Other times, she just looked at him, with a mix of desire, dominance, and tenderness. Liam had surrendered, but he wasn't lost. He was exactly where he wanted to be, even if he hadn't known it until now. Her strength didn't overwhelm him. It set him free. This woman, who had once restrained him, now made him yield in an entirely different way, with care, with precision, with power. And all of that, he was just beginning to understand. Could feel both thrilling and safe. What followed was a kind of choreography, but not the rehearsed kind. It was instinctive, and only she knew the steps. Liam simply followed, and for the first time, wanted to dance without leading. Jade didn't smile. She observed. Every breath he took, every attempt to respond, every flicker of hesitation in his eyes. And with that, she guided, with her hips, with the weight of her body, with silence. She would retreat just a few inches, only to watch him lean forward. Then, in one decisive motion, she'd press him back into the couch, her thighs locked around his waist. Firm, controlled, like arms, but warmer, more inescapable. She held him there, not with force, but with certainty. And when he instinctively tried to lift his torso, she simply met his gaze, leaned in, and with her legs crossed behind him, kept him exactly where she wanted. The control was undeniable, but the desire was shared. Stay, that's all she said, and he did. His eyes traced the defined muscles of her thighs, the sharp lateral line curving with power. There was a beauty there he'd never noticed in any woman, an elegant strength, and now, unavoidable. She knew what he was feeling, and she played with it, not out of vanity, but instinct. She shifted between enveloping and teasing, between touch and restraint, between warmth and suspense. And Liam, even in confusion, felt something inside him realign. What once might have felt strange, now felt inevitable. Her dominance didn't diminish him. It completed him. It was as if, by offering his body, he was reclaiming another part of himself. The part that had never been touched. The part that longed to surrender, but had never found someone worthy of it. Now he had. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. The kind that only exists when two bodies understand each other, and the rest of the world stops making sense. Jade sat on the floor, leaning against the couch, head slightly bowed and arms crossed over her knees. Her hair was tied back, still damp with sweat. Liam was beside her, eyes fixed on her, trying to decode what he didn't yet know he needed to understand. She spoke first, but not with a firm voice. It was soft, as if saying something aloud for the first time, even to herself. I once hurt someone on impulse, someone I cared about. He didn't react immediately, just furrowed his brow slightly, as if waiting to hear more before passing judgment. I was younger, at a competition. I lost control. It wasn't serious, but It was too much. Since then, I avoid getting attached. I avoid letting myself go. A pause. With you, I almost lost control, but not out of anger. She turned her head slowly. She wasn't looking for forgiveness. She was looking for understanding. I'm afraid I don't know how to hold back. With me, it's either everything or nothing. Liam didn't respond right away, but his answer came through a gesture. He simply leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers. They stayed like that, breathing together. Yes, she was strong. But now he saw what lived beneath the armor, a strength born of pain, of the need to control the world so it wouldn't consume her. He, on the other hand, didn't need to dominate anything, just be. And that night, he stayed, not out of submission, but because, by understanding what she had hidden, he finally saw who she truly was. And that was enough. Today, when Liam crosses the city to meet her after work, he no longer hides inside his own silence. He watches the way Jade walks ahead, steady steps, alert gaze, a posture that always seems ready to protect. And he smiles. At first, he thought he needed to explain himself. Now, he understands. There's nothing to justify when you're exactly where you want to be. She's still who she's always been. Strong, direct, intense. But now, she holds his hand in public. She spoons him from behind when they sleep, even though she's bigger. And sometimes, on an ordinary Sunday, she pins him to the couch just to see him laugh, trying to escape and give up. The world may not understand, but he doesn't need it to. There, in her arms, between the subtle commands and silent protection, he discovered something rare, the freedom of being led, the peace of being held, and the unexpected pleasure of finally, simply surrendering. And if you've made it this far, thank you for feeling this story with us. If it stirred something in you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it. There's so much more coming, always her way.